Call the regular board meeting of the April meeting of the, excuse me, Hudson River Black River Regulating District to order. We've already done the pledge. Roll call, Mr. Farrar.
Mr. Chairman, Mark Finkel.
Here.
Albert Hayes.
Here.
David Bergstresser.
Here.
Anthony Netto. Here. Jeffrey Rosenthal.
Excused.
Robert Moore.
Here.
Michael Clark.
Here.
Robert Leslie.
Here.
Robert Fulton.
Here.
John Hodgson.
Here.
Stephanie Rizicki.
Here.
Richard Farrar. Here. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. And I am losing my voice. I don't know why. We need a motion to adopt a revised meeting agenda. We have a third contract under 9 to approve on the roofing of the garage. So I'd like, what?
I'll make that motion.
Mr. Bergstresser.
Second?
I'll second.
Mr. Netto.
All in favor of the revised agenda? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Opposed. I see no guests to introduce, and I'm assuming there's no public comment because there's no one here. So we need approval of the March 10th, 2015 regular board minutes. They're all in your packet. Is there any discussion or correction? If not, a motion to accept the minutes of March 10th.
I'll make that motion.
Mr. Hayes.
I'll second.
Mr. Bergstresser.
Any further discussion? If not, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Report of the Executive Director. Mr. Clark.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. You can find my report beginning on page 38 of the board package. And the detail is contained within those 2 pages. However, I would like to also direct your attention to page 41 and 42, which is right after my report. There is a resolution there. Well, my memo begins on page 40. And what this is a resolution, a proposed resolution. We're asking the board to authorize me to amend enter into a memorandum of agreement with CSEA to amend the current collective bargaining agreement, which we just finished a few months ago, to include the title of engineering assistant. That was one of the items negotiated, and you'll notice that on the back of the resolution, that's page 42, in red, that title is now contained. You'll notice that it's got the scale in there, as do all the other titles, from starting rate all the way to, and the steps all the way to service rate. Presently, that, if you recall, that title is vacant, and whether or not or how soon that may be filled is still up for discussion. So I ask that the board consider that resolution, and quickly before any further discussion of that, I also want to mention that senior staff continues discussions with New York State Environmental Facilities Corporation. We're pursuing really an alternative method of funding, or methods, as an alternative to bonding for the capital projects. Bonding is still an option. However, working with EFC and potentially through the state revolving fund appears to have long promise. If we are able to, we may be able to realize significant savings when we have a better, firmer handle on it. And I certainly hope by next meeting I can report back to the board with something firm. And at least that's my hope at this point. So that, again, we've got another, just to conclude that, we've had a couple of meetings already and a conference call. We have a follow-up meeting later this week with the EFC, really to talk about the nuts and bolts of what we do, because it's not entirely clear to everyone that doesn't do what we do on a daily basis, how that actually works. So we'll be meeting with their engineers.
If I'm not mistaken, potentially it's a huge savings of money for the
There is the
district.
potential for a significant savings, and we've got to work through the process and get them on board first if they're going to get on board. But we're certainly obligated to pursue every means to save money, and there's a chance, there's a good chance to save some serious cash by going this way, but we don't know for certain yet. Like I said, I hope that come May, then I'm going to have something more concrete to report.
Very good.
And also, just as an aside, if the board from time to time has heard myself and staff discuss reservoir operating agreements, we've got two, one at Conklerville, and just recently we've begun internal discussions about the Stillwater Reservoir Operating Agreement. That one is actually set to, presently will expire in less than 2 years, so you need to be thinking seriously about it. Again, that discussion comes back to how do you value that. We have some, what I believe are good, solid concepts, and yet you won't find them anywhere else. So we're kicking around ideas as to how we can formalize that, how to value a reservoir operating agreement. And again, let me do a little background quickly. Those agreements are separate from the apportionments that we have for the Black River and for the Hudson River, where the folks downstream are assessed for the benefit from the reservoirs. These reservoir operating agreements really recognize the fact that there are a hydroelectric facility at each one of those dams, and not only do they get the benefit of a steady flow of water, a year-round flow of water, but also by virtue of the fact that they utilize the head created by those dams that are owned by New York State. One of the ideas we've thrown out is possibly a rulemaking to deal with valuing those kind of contracts and setting something in the stone. There's not a lot of history throughout the state. There's not a lot of consistency, and I think that it has promise. So that's another item that I'm sure that we will bring back to the board here in the coming months.
So we need a resolution authorizing the executive director to enter into that memo of understanding with the union regarding the addition of the engineering assistant title to the current collective bargaining agreement.
Correct.
I need a motion to that effect.
I'd like to make that motion.
Mr. Hayes.
Do we have a second? Any further discussion, or if not, all in favor, please signify aye. Any opposed? Motion carries.
If I could conclude my report, I don't mean to take so much time. I also wanted to mention that 3 weeks ago now, our new field assistant, Danielle Thorne, began at the Sacandaga Field Office. As I participated initially in the orientation, and her training is ongoing and getting ready for that lake season. That's sure to come. Also met with other staff for land surveying services through Ryan Biggs, Clark Davis, not me, Clark. It's an hourly contract that you may or may not remember that the regulating district entered into last year for as needed surveying services, since we no longer have a professional land surveyor on staff. So we had a kickoff meeting with some project specifics for work primarily on the New York State property line around, well, not primarily, entirely around Great Sacandaga Lake. And also, I missed it in my report earlier, I attended a couple of continuing education things in the past month for, to maintain my engineer's license. It's something that also that a chief engineer does on a regular basis, and our operations engineer, Mike Mosier. And that is my report, and probably enough.
Any questions or comments for Mr. Clark? Thank you very much. Move on to contracts. First contract, resolution to approve the third amendment to contract C-032-007. Mr. Coulter.
Thank you. I did hand out, and brought with me and handed out a summary memorandum and then a copy of the there's an attached proposal as well as a resolution concerning that contract. In an effort to be prepared when we are funded for and move forward on the ice sluice repair project, the staff would like to put in place the services it needs for on-site construction monitoring. GEI Consultants is a firm who has been hired by the district for some time now to come up with the ice sluice evaluation, the ice sluice design, and the construction drawings and specifications, which we have used and will use for the construction bidding for the ice sluice remediation. And at this point, the district staff would like, we had asked for and received a proposal from GEI for construction monitoring services, and so the district staff recommends accepting GEI's construction services and scope of work fee proposal in the amount of $94,500, which would increase the total contract price to $342,000. And their scope of work is attached. It's field work, it's review of the bid documents, includes a probable cost estimate, their involvement in our pre-bid meetings, and review of the construction-related documents, submittals, and then obviously on-site observation during construction to make sure that it's completed consistent with their design. So we'll be looking for board acceptance of this recommendation.
Can I ask a question?
Certainly.
Seems like a lot of money to fix an ice sluice, but that's okay. But what is an ice sluice?
Well, originally it was designed literally to pass the ice that built up in the passageway that carries the water to the spillway at Conklinville and then eventually down to the EJ West hydroelectric facility.
Okay.
Like a log sluice. It's just situated right at the end of that channel. And originally, I'm sure, at least in design theory, they would remove stop logs and let a little bit of water through that section, and then any ice that built up would flow through it.
Okay.
Or debris and logs. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think on the drawings, officially, it's been labeled since 1930 as the ice sluice, and so we carried that term, but it probably could have been used for debris that built up in front of the hydro plant at the end of the channel.
Okay.
And it's basically get rid of whatever material it floats in, that if they don't, it just circulates around on the surface. And sometime, I'm not even sure, and I think that's part of the issue. We're not sure of the modification, repair, and previous design, previous repair history. But the wooden logs that comprise the gate structure, if you will, in the slots in the ice sluice were left in place permanently, filled with concrete, and the condition of that is not very good. And then, as it turned out, when we did an analysis of that structure for repair, we found out that the adjoining structure did not conform to the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission safety requirements. So the repair is not just that sluice slot, but the adjoining concrete structure also.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
So we can pass this resolution without having all our funding in place?
This is just,
At this-
this is just a modification to the
Existing
existing engineering contract.
Okay.
The billing of which would not occur until we authorize
Okay.
the work or the work.
Just checking.
Mr. Moore?
Noting that this is Mr. Fulton, that this is the fourth amendment to the contract.
Correct.
What were the other three amendments related to the contract? Were they cost related?
Oh, yes. I think one of them
One
was
was an
an extension, because this contract was originally issued in 2007 when we had several analysis done. The bulk of the work associated with the contract has been geotechnical in nature. GEI is strong in geotechnical, and at Conklinville, we've had the need to complete some investigation, piezometers, wells to monitor the pressure of the water inside the dam. And so we had one of them was the date extension. We had an amendment to scope, which involved, I believe, about an $18,000 increase. And Rick, can you help my memory as to the third?
No.
Would have
I'm
been,
just looking actually at mine.
It was additional scope for the, it was the last one. It was the additional scope for the second phase of the geotechnical investigation. So we had, as a result of the first geotechnical investigation, the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission reviewed the report of GEI and recommended additional piezometers be installed. As a result of that request, we had to go back to GEI and ask for a proposal and scope for design of those additional piezometers. They also will come out into the field, monitor the installation of those piezometers, and develop reports related to their installation. And so the third amendment was for that work.
I get just assuring that all of the related engineering costs are represented by that figure through $342,000.
Yes, that's the total to date, with the addition of the $94,500.
Thank you.
Any other questions? If not, a motion to approve the resolution to the Third Amendment of the contract, C-032077, as recommended by Mr. Fuller.
so moved.
Mr. Bergquist.
The second?
I'll second.
Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Next contract, motion authorizing the staff to procure engineering services for completion of the Stillwater Dam third part 12. Well, you could read it.
The tongue twister, huh? All right. And that is, you can find that on page 43, I believe. It is the
Yes.
report packet.
Correct.
Find it in mine. It's related to the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission's 5-year requirements for inspection of the facilities that are licensed by the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. As I say, those inspections have to be completed every 5 years by an independent engineering consultant. And so we would use our engineering procurement 136A as a guide and procure those services using our annual receipt of the annual statement of qualifications to hire an engineer qualified to complete that activity. And that report is due to January 1st, 2016, and I've got an estimated schedule there when we think that the work will occur. So at this point, we're just looking for authorization to procure those services.
Any questions?
We just need to give me a
Motion authorizing the,
You don't need a motion, do you?
Well, yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'll make the motion.
Mr. Neto.
any second to the motion?
I'll second that.
Further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? So moved. The third contract was the addendum to the board meeting agenda, the roof in Second Avenue. Who's speaking to that?
I can, certainly. And I did hand out the memorandum as well as an attached resolution. We issued a notice for invitation for bids for the replacement of Sacandaga Field Office garage roof back March 9th, specifically seeking bids from New York State Certified Minority or Women-Owned Business Enterprise. We had 5 firms which submitted a bid. They submitted the bid by the deadline, March 31st. We opened those, and the summary of the bid amounts are listed in the table in the memo. We received 2 out of the 5 were WBE Women Business Enterprise, and 1 was identified as a minority business enterprise. We had estimated the probable cost for the roof repair to be about $31,000. The apparent low bid was by AMZ Construction Services. They are a state-certified women business enterprise, and their bid amount was $33,735. As we do with all of our construction contract procurements, we require the bidders to supply information on their construction or their history of experience, financial status, and so we reviewed all of that evidence, and they satisfied the requirements of the solicitation. We confirmed their certification with the state as far as their women business enterprise status, and so the district staff recommends to the board that they conditionally award the work to AMZ Construction, and we seek board acceptance of the recommendation and authorization to form a contract to complete the work and authorize the executive director to execute an agreement in the amount of $33,735.
I'm amazed at the range of estimates here,
Yeah.
from 78 to 33.
It seems to be the trend. We, if you remember back to our, not construction, but it was the subsurface work.
Yeah.
We up at Indian Lake, it was ended up being a $30,000 job, and the other bidder that was a high bidder was in the $150,000 range.
But you would
So-
think a roof is a roof is a roof. Materials are materials. It seems a little more.
Apparently, individual firms' overheads are significantly different. Or their profit is, I don't know which.
So that costs too, everything takers off.
That's the entire job, yeah.
So what happens, they take part of the shingles off and find a patch where it's got to be replaced or something?
Well, we have set up the contract with unit prices for materials, so we anticipated a certain amount of underlayment needing to be replaced, or amount of, the gutters to be replaced, and certain elements. They're all unit prices in the contract. So if we get in and find that additional sheathing needs to be removed and replaced, it would be done so at the unit price. Even though the quantity isn't exact as in the bid, it's made known to the bidding firms that these are estimates, and that the unit price that they're providing is what we would turn to in the event of a change in the quantities.
Actually, doesn't the oral history of the regulating district, when the Sacandaga field office was built, didn't the story I've always heard, it was that the roofing was done when the snow was flying,
Oh, I don't remember.
which
I
was
wouldn't
never
doubt
good
it.
for shingles.
You're right.
But yeah, it's not a good time to
Don't know what's going
putting
Which would explain a
shingles
lot,
up on the roof.
actually.
Yeah.
It probably never sealed, well, they never sealed for the entire winter.
Right.
Some of the areas I've seen, there's no underlayment, there's shingle on top of plywood.
Well, the entire facility was built in what, 93?
Right, 93.
Right.
So it's
Yeah.
So there,
91, 92.
you would expect to have gotten more than,
probably a 25-year roof, I believe.
Yeah, it's on the lake, I wouldn't.
And normally when they say 25 years, 30 is no problem, but if you take, we've been patching now for as long as I've been here. So it goes back 8 years at least, and probably more than that. So for half the life of the roof, the things had problems. And
I found roofs that are on lake shores like that don't last as long because of the weather, the wind,
well, we do get
the
wind.
beating they take.
Yep.
Are all these contracts same product, asphalt or steel or?
You mean the individual bids themselves?
The materials.
Based on the same.
Your
That
specs.
every one of them based on the same exact set of specifications, requirements, quantities, and materials, yes. Yep. Yeah, we put together a full package that has an introduction that explains all of the specific work, the requirements of contracting with the district, requirements of contracting with the state, a specific bid sheet which labels outlines the quantity where they have to insert their price, and then a fairly extensive set of general conditions for contracting, and payment items section. So it's a full-blown package that we issue. Pretty extensive sometimes for some of our smaller jobs, but I prefer to err on that side than to skimp when it comes to a contract.
True. All right, well, unless there's some other comments, we need a motion to allow allow us to enter into a contract with AMZ to replace the roof?
Yep, make that motion.
Not to, at a contract price of $33,735.
For that, I'll make that motion.
Mr. Hayes?
Second? Somebody?
I'll second it.
Mr. Burns?
Any further comment?
I have none.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. We move to committee reports. First one is the Governance Committee report. Chairman.
Yes, we have a resolution to satisfy the annual review and approval of investment policy. Mr. Ferrara.
As discussed in committee, this resolution and policy, along with the following two, have no changes, and I recommend the board adopt.
Just housekeeping.
Correct.
I'll make the motion.
To accept the committee report.
Accept the committee's report.
I will second that.
Mr. Burns-Spencer? Mr. Hayes?
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? The second resolution?
The second resolution we have is to satisfy the annual review and approval of procurement policy. Mr. Ferrara.
Again, both this and the following property guidelines policy have no changes, and I recommend the board adopt both policies. Annual review of both.
Motion to accept the resolution?
I will make that motion.
I'll second.
Mr. Hayes, Mr. Netter.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Third resolution.
Next, we have a resolution to satisfy the annual review and approval of the property guidelines policy. Mr. Ferrara.
Again, no change to this policy, and I recommend the board adopt the annual review for the property guidelines.
I'll make that motion.
Mr. Burns?
Second?
I'll second that.
All
Mr. Hayes?
all in favor?
Aye.
Can we sell the vote now?
Good. Next committee report. General Counsel, Mr. Lefty.
First, I'd like to apologize for streaming in here at the last possible second. I had to put the kids on the bus in Albany this morning, my wife being in Baltimore. It remains quiet on the litigation front. We await the outcome of the competing dispositive motions in NIMO's federal court challenge and in the slip and fall case in front of Captain Naughty's. I continue to prepare the Sansevera appeal. I'll have that for you probably about 10 days before the next meeting, so that you'll have ample time to look at it. At that time, I'll also deliver it to the Sanseveras and each of the other 6 families. So everybody will have about the same 10 days to look at it. My thought is if I deliver it to you guys now, you probably won't look at it until 10 days before. So why give them several bites at the apple? We are awaiting first ruling regarding the commencement of headwater benefits payments. I've had a number of conversations with counsel for the Thompsons. They're a party up on the Stillwater Reservoir. They are involved in an enforcement action brought against them by DEC's Region 6 concerning the use of their ferry or pontoon boat on the Stillwater Reservoir. Basically, I've been asked whether the board would consent to allowing the ferry to be docked or moored periodically on the regulating district's lands just to the north of the dock, boat launch, or at our dock by our boathouse. After studying the matter and consulting with counsel for DEC, who then consulted with his lands and forest people, I would recommend that if the regulating district wants to do that, it not enter into a lease with the Thompsons regarding the use of the dock or the periodic use, but basically allow periodic use as afforded to other members of the public under the thought that that shouldn't present a problem as long as our guys can work around it when it's there. Basically, it prevents the Thompsons from traversing the entire length of the reservoir back from the, I can never pronounce it,
Norwich Walk.
Norwich Walk, to, return somebody to civilization, so to speak, or civilization with access to roads, and then having to return all the way to the hotel or the resort, the landing out there, just to return back in the morning again to ferry people back out. And I think if we will acquiesce to this, that will permit DEC to come to some sort of an agreement with the Thompsons in satisfaction of their enforcement action. So that's really our role in this. We could say no, and they would have to figure out this some other way. DEC is ready to acquiesce, and the Thompsons appear ready to resolve the matter.
So the DEC is okay with this? They're not opposed to it, how's that?
They're not vehemently opposed to it.
Okay.
And if we don't enter into a lease, which really requires that we figure exactly where the property boundary is and what's in forest preserve, what's not in forest preserve, and what uses are permitted, they think that we're going to be okay.
Who's they?
DEC's Lands and Forests and enforcement attorney.
Basically, they don't want the boat being
At the
docked
public
overnight
dock.
at the public
right.
launch, is what it comes down, at least that's on the surface.
I have no problem leaving it over, as long as there's no.
Did you
liability.
require a motion to allow that, or?
No, just acquiescence to the concept. As long as you guys understand what's going on, I think we're okay.
I don't have a problem with
I
it.
have no problem.
Um,
I understand what's going on out there, so.
Okay.
Anybody on the board have a
Yeah.
problem with this issue?
If something happens with their boat coming, are we liable for it or anything?
Is there any liability for the,
If something happens when their boat comes in, maybe they hit something, or we're not liable for it?
Well, yeah, there'd be the potential for liability for the district, like there is for any other
That exists today.
dock
Yeah.
that we operate anywhere. If somebody were to, pull up to it, trip getting out, or water ski by it, and,
My
try and
question,
get somebody wet.
Look,
with the
can we
documents.
require them to have some insurance or?
Yeah, like a hold harmless
Like a
agreement,
hold
or any
harmless.
waivers, or
Is it any different than the boardwalks down in Old Forge that are around the dams?
No, same level of liability. We have insurance coverage. We don't have anything specific to the Thompsons.
No, so we're covered.
Yes, for most.
Okay.
General liability,
General
that's
liability
quite
is
extensive.
Right.
would it be appropriate to ask for the Thompsons to name the district as additional insured on their liability policy?
I think we plan to do that, yes.
I never see
that.
You're gonna have to have reference.
Well, again, I have no issue with it. Anybody else?
it's just one, is it a commercial operation they're running, or is it just private?
It's basically a commercial.
It's commercial.
However, if I may, having in-depth knowledge of this circumstance, they also do provide necessary service to the residents, the year-round residents or seasonal residents of Beaver River,
Except by boat.
with provisions, gas service and other things.
Is that thing modified to come in?
It is commercial, however, there's a benevolent purpose in what they do.
It's in lieu of a public highway.
Correct.
Yes.
I have just one question on what modifications we might have to make or staff will have to make in order to allow the public to use.
Well, I don't think
The dock.
we have any
The
intention of
ramp
letting
or
the
the-
public use that dock.
So how are they getting from
As
the
I understand
boat
it,
back?
that's a good question, Rob. That might be, I'm sorry, that might be lingering out there. As I understand it, the concept is
So it's just the pilot
that
of the boat who's
they
going
would
to be-
moor the thing
Correct.
over in front of our dock and then still load, unload from the
Oh, so that
public
really
launch.
reduces liability.
It's just
Yes.
essentially overnight parking, or if you want to call it that. Not using the public to access from our.
So it's only the captain of the boat who's
Yeah.
going to be
No,
probably
and-
coming across our
and
dock.
Gilligan too,
across
right.
The ramp and up the steps to get.
As I
go somewhere else
understand it, it would be, I mean, I don't mean to cut in on this, but it's really, it's just overnight parking, docking, when that thing's unloaded, when they make their last trip, and if their last trip ends at Stillwater, that rather than leave
Where do they go?
the barge tied off to the DEC public launch right there, that they would then shuttle it over, just around the corner and
Right.
and
Bring it
moor it
over to
at
our dock.
regulating district's dock, and then in the morning bring it back and still load from the public launch, because that would be a huge issue, I agree, if they were
Because
to
our
load
dock
it.
right now is almost nothing more than just a float.
Well, it is, it's big
like a
float.
swim float. I mean, it just
They may
it
have to
happens
do,
to be
they
20,
may have to
25
do
by
something to
25.
it. They may have to do something to that dock, even to be, because it's good size,
It's got the cleats
between
on
the
it, but
barge and the pushers that they use.
there are no rails.
They may have to provide additional anchorage, I don't know, or another mooring ball, it's
Okay.
Okay, well,
it's just a concept at
as long as
this
we
point.
got our sense of where we're at, so.
Okay. Other than that, I met with Mr. Moore to discuss ethics.
Absolutely.
Went through the 2-hour live ethics training with him. And I guess that's it in my report.
Any questions, Mr. Leslie? Next, as you remember last meeting, we created the compliance officer position, so happy to welcome Stephanie Mazicki. Sorry, tripped over that. And your first report.
Good morning and thank you. My report begins on page 45, and I will highlight a few items that I've been working on the past month. Fourth quarter utilization report is due April 15, 2015. The MWBE spend or utilization is at 43,385.55, with the majority of that consisting of one subcontractor working it for Bergman at the Indian Lake project, which came in at 33,520. We also had Bryant Rubino, the bond counsel, at 8910. Total expenditures for the period was $207,823.73. Fourth quarter goal was 20.9%. The ending fiscal year, we came in at 18.74. The approved goal was 1887, which we missed by a fraction. The new fiscal year.
Which is not an issue. We're not gonna get,
I wouldn't think
we're
so.
not gonna get reported for missing by point.
.01. So the upcoming year that we're in now, beginning April 1st, is at 30%, which we previously discussed. It'll be 25% goal for women business-owned and 5% for the minority business enterprises. Under public authority, the budget report for 2016, which was approved at the March board meeting, was posted to Paris on time. The CFO is currently working with the OSC budget report, which is due June 30th. And as a reminder, pursuant to public authority law, section 2879, the board must review and approve procurement contracts annually. The contract reports are provided in your packet each month. They're on page 46. For non-legal, page 47 is MWBE, and 48 is legal services. This meets the annual requirement. Under procurement, the Albany office rental agreement was approved by OSC and AG, and that covers us through next February. Second amendment to the Hawkinsville remediation and removal final study was approved, and currently I'm working with the CFO on the entire compliance environment to make sure that all of our policies are up to date and posted properly. And that completes my report. Do you have any
Very good
questions?
report. Any questions? Very good, thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome.
And welcome,
Thank you.
even though I said your name wrong. Chief Fiscal Officer, Mr. Brown.
Mr. Chairman, my report can be found on page 49 and ends on page 88. Page 50 is the summary for period ending March 31st, 2015, which incorporates the consolidated financials for both Hudson River and Black River area, and also general board activity. Cash flows, as I have historically done, we'll go through the current cycle end of June 30th, 2015, and then I'm going through forecast through the upcoming new cycle, which would end June 30th, 2018. Those are on pages 72, 3, 4, and 75. The draft budget for the upcoming cycle that I just alluded to, which is will be July 1, 2015 through June 30, 2018, is largely completed for all of the recurring expenses that the district historically has to cover to perform operations and other things. The thing that I'm looking at most closely is what is going to be the ultimate funding route for the capital projects. And depending on what alternative that will end up to be, will change the budget one way or the other. And again, it's largely going to change in the debt service area. So if we are fortunate enough to get at least funding through EFC that is in the two programs that the board is aware of, we will hugely enjoy their AAA bond rating, which we would never get in a million years on our own. So at a minimum, if we get that, we're going to save hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt service. If we're fortunate enough to get, and not have to bond at all, we'll still get their AAA rating if they lend us the money directly. So if it's either one of those alternatives, the budget is going to look pretty much how I've estimated it to date. I've used a 3.5% debt load, which is, if you go out and look at any of the current AAA rates for 20 years or 25 years, you might get it at 3, you might get it at 3.25, you might get it at 3.5. So I'm thinking in that ballpark. So to that end, I will send the entire board, obviously including the Finance Committee, the latest pass of the draft, and it will incorporate all of the debt service at 3.5%. And that has changed the budget slightly, but again, as I indicated to Mr. Moore, the Hudson River area budget we're locked into assessments of $2,994,100 anyway. So anything you do in that budget above the line is not going to change that number. But if we can certainly get a lot of debt service out of there, it helps us in other areas, and that's what I'm hoping for. Black River, I think the board's wishes is to try to achieve some reduction off of the increase that we had in the last 3-year cycle. And, you know, once we get to that debt service, you know, once we lock that down, we'll see where that'll end up. But I'll get that out to the entire board following this meeting. And one final thing on page 89, we do have some board member expenses that the board needs to approve. And those would be expenses for Mr. Burgess.
Everybody see those? Any discussion? Motion to accept the board expenses?
I'll make that motion.
Mr. Hayes?
Second?
I'll second.
Mr.
All in
Medley?
favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Very good.
That's my report, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Chief Engineer.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. My report begins on page 90. Continuing in the trend that we had seen in January and February, March also was rather dry. In fact, precipitation in the Hudson River area, Indian Lake, Mayfield, Conklinville varied from, well, 28 to 30% of historic average precip. And as a result, we had, I didn't actually review all of the 16 years since I've been with the district, but we had inflows for the month of March that were in the range of 19 to 21%, and I think that's probably the lowest, just based on recollection, that I've ever seen. So it's a real indication of how dry it was in March. Black River area was fairly similar, although a little bit higher, 36 to 54% of historic precip, but the inflow itself was also low at Stillwater at only 18% of historic average inflow. We still have some snowpack. We started on or about April 3rd, I would say, April 3rd, April 4th, our refilling at all of the reservoirs, cut back on our releases to the minimum flows, and then restoring all the water that we can at this point, and making some progress. Certainly, maybe 15 to 20, 25%, depending on the reservoir you're speaking about in terms of the total volume of water that's needed to fill these reservoirs. We certainly will need, our historic average precip for the rest of the spring, I think, to fill the reservoirs. And most cases, historically, it's more than enough rainfall to fill them. So, in general, I think we're in good position. There's still snowing in the watersheds. Anywhere from 3 to 5 inches of water content in various survey areas. So while it may seem a little bit slow and a little bit dry, all it would take is a 2 or 3 inch rainstorm and all that snow that's still there to fill us up pretty rapidly, and that can, the meteorological conditions can change pretty rapidly, and we can get that kind of event. But all in all, I think we're in a pretty good position right now, and just going to sit back and wait for the snow and the rain to fill our reservoirs, and sometime in June we'll start the season over, start the cycle over again and begin releasing, and if there are any questions on the operation, I can take those. I did have one other item I think was attached. It's related to the USGS contract. You should have a memo. Should be at the end of my report, I believe, is where it's located. Page 124. Page 124. we have a cooperative agreement with the USGS for the operation of the river and reservoir gauges. We have a statutory obligation to monitor flow in the rivers or at the reservoirs that are specifically related to our operation. We have a new agreement that coincides with our 3-year budget. It's been on that same cycle for probably, this must be at least the third cycle, the USGS contract coinciding with ours. Earlier on, it was offset by 6 or 8 months, but it coincides with ours, so the next contract's July 1st, 2015 through June 30th, 2018. As and consistent with the trend we've seen over the last 2 or 3 contracts, renewal.
Not getting cheaper.
It's not getting any cheaper at all. The federal government, the USGS, is looking to their cooperative partner to pay an increasingly larger share, significantly larger. This year it's 11%, almost 12% increase from the last 3-year cycle, and that's about a $40,000 increase over the 3-year period. So I've taken a look at our system of gauges, and I did attach a couple maps which have been provided by the USGS. There are green diamonds on there. They're for the watershed of the Hudson and the Black River watershed, which I identify the gauges that we're operating and that which I feel are, a minimum that we require to properly operate the reservoirs. There are 2 which are represented by one each on the Hudson and the Black River watershed map. On the Hudson River watershed, it's a red diamond in the upper right-hand corner. It's pretty fairly close to Route 87, the Northway label. And then on the Independence, in the middle, horizontally and vertically in the Black River watershed. These 2 gauges, the Hudson River being the Scroon River at Riverbank, and in the Black River, the Independence at Donaldsburg, are 2 gauges that are not downstream of any of our reservoirs. They're fairly small drainage areas. The Independence River is 88 square miles, and that represents only 4.7% of the Black River area. The Scroon River gauge in the Hudson River area, actually only supplies us stage. That is the elevation of the river at that location. Of course, the conditions of the data that these gauges have been providing were in place before I started, and again, now that we've seen this rather steep increase, I think that we can make some reductions in our cost by eliminating these 2 particular gauges, specifically since they don't really give us an awful lot of information about the watershed and certainly give us no information about the reservoirs with regard to release or adjacent stream flow that is of concern. So we're recommending that we eliminate the Scroon River and the Independence gauge from the network of gauges that are currently funded by the regulating district, beginning with the 2015-18 USGS cooperative agreement. And I'd be happy to take any questions on.
What do they cost us normally?
What's the savings on that?
Well, that savings would be $49,320 over 3 years.
Oh, yeah.
So the increase plus a little more, sorry.
Right.
So the cooperative agreement, $376,000, would that be reduced by the savings if we eliminate those 2 gauges?
It would be, yes. Right, so it actually would bring it down by, about $9,000 below what we paid for the last 3-year cycle.
Is there any other providers of the service other than the USGS?
No, there's not. No. So, we've talked about that too, and could we, while we have the statutory obligation to monitor, and we have gauges, our own gauges installed at the reservoir. It's a matter of how that data is easily accessible to it becomes accessible to the staff, specifically myself, for operation. So certainly a portion of the agreement is the USGS uploading the information from our equipment, putting it into a form that can be used, that becomes a record, and then also posting it on the website. That I don't think we could probably come anywhere close to doing that. They already have in place the system. Stillwater, they use a satellite system to upload the information. It's a dial-up phone-operated system at Old Forge and Six Lake, at Indian Lake. It would probably be fairly costly, and I don't even think over long term for the $370,000. The network of river gauges, after we have worked through land leases and a set of equipment, brought in additional staff that would have to monitor and maintain them, that we could probably have much of a way of saving compared to the $300,000. So, but these two in particular, we just don't have. They just don't benefit our operation. And one of them is only a partial of the information that you could essentially get. That's a USGS decision. Certainly we could have over the years paid for the Schroon River gauge being converted from just a stage to a flow gauge, but that would increase that gauge. I believe is only right now it's $4,600 a year. If we paid for the labor and the effort to increase it in terms of its information to a flow gauge, there would be a cost, and it would probably jump then to an annual cost closer to the independence, which is about $10,000 or $11,000 a year. So, the Schroon River is a smaller percentage of the Hudson. And again, looking back on the number of times that I've actually reviewed the information for the Schroon or the Independence, I can probably count on 2 hands over the years. And so I really don't think we'll
Need a board resolution to
miss that
eliminate
at
those?
all. I think a motion to do that?
No, I think if the board is okay with the recommended elimination of those gauges, when we provide the board with the full contract in June,
It will reflect that.
it'll reflect that, and we'll have an opportunity
Yeah,
to once again revisit it, and then.
Right, what we'll do now, right now, we have the contract,
Right.
Rick and I are reviewing that, and I would be going back to the USGS with the modifications.
Correct.
They would issue a new contract
Correct.
eliminating those 2 gauges.
Which we would then bring to you at the June meeting.
Very good.
Thank you.
Any other questions of Mr. Sulkin? If not, our administrator, Mr. Hodgins.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My report starts on page 128. I just want to report that operations are normal in both areas. The access permits for the Great Sacandaga Lake expired on March 15th, the renewal period. We had 160 people fail to renew on the lake, up a little bit more than normal. So we just recently mailed out postcards as reminders that they failed to renew. Our third step in that process is if they still fail to renew, then we'll go out and tag anything that's on their permit area, docks, steps, whatever, as a last-ditch effort to get them to renew their permit. So we do everything we can to get the people to renew them without taking them away or issuing them to somebody else. Let's see, staff in both areas are still continuing with the snow survey about every 2 weeks, and some areas yesterday measured 22 inches of snow in some of the areas.
Really?
Yeah, so there's still quite a bit of snow out there. I'll take any questions anybody has.
Figure out how to pipe the water to California.
Catapult.
Any other questions? If not, move to board member questions and comments. I don't know if it's under 11 or 12, but I'd like the board to consider moving our September meeting from Lowville to Long Lake, the Adirondack Hotel. I just think it's a better location, it'd be different. And, you know, nice restaurant there, it's convenient for everybody. I don't know if we have to vote on it, but
Just for the September meeting?
September meeting. I'd like to move to September. I have spoken, they will take state rate. You know, I think they'd like to have a commitment fairly soon because they don't have that many rooms. So, if we know. Okay.
Mr. Chairman, along the same lines, I've been asked to participate in a Boy Scout camp week that would fall during our July meeting. I just wanted to make you aware of whether you want to move the meeting or
We certainly can.
participation or,
Oh, no,
excuse me.
you're not excused from the Boy Scouts.
Yeah,
Aren't you a little old for your Boy Scouts?
It's never too old.
Just a little.
yeah. Yeah, no, take that advice. We have time to do that next meeting, right? Move
Sure.
the date.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Get you here. Need a resolution for our next board meeting, which Northville, we're going to the Northville Town Hall on May 12th.
I make that motion.
Mr. Hayes?
Second? All in favor?
Aye.
Motion to adjourn. And, oh, by the way, we should recognize that we all have our new state logo caps. It's nice.
Motion to
Thank you.
Mr. Bergström?
All in favor?
Mr. Neto?
Aye.
Thank you, everybody.